You're at a birthday party. Yours. Someone hands you a slice of cake and for half a second you do the math in your head. How did another year disappear that fast? You blink and it's gone, 12 months folded down into a handful of memories you could count on one hand. Everyone laughs it off. Time flies, they say. But the real answer is far stranger than that, and it has almost nothing to do with the calendar. Your brain is not a clock. It never has been. What feels like time passing is actually your brain counting something else entirely. And once you see what that something is, you will never experience an ordinary day the same way again. Start with a simple fact. A year, when you were 7, felt enormous. A single summer stretched out like its own small lifetime. Now a year slides by like a weekend. Nothing about the clock changed. What changed is the ratio. When you were 7, 1 year was 1/7 of everything you had ever lived. Now it might be 1/40th, 1/50th, smaller every year, even while the year itself stays exactly the same length. Psychologists call this proportional time. Your sense of duration is measured not in hours but in fractions of a life already lived. Strange, right? But there's a second mechanism running underneath it, and it's the one that actually decides how fast a single day feels while you're living it. Your brain doesn't record time, it records novelty. Every new experience gets tagged and stored in rich detail because your brain doesn't know yet whether it might matter for survival. A new city, a new face, a first kiss, a first funeral, a first day at a new job. All of it filed away in high resolution. But a routine? A commute you've driven 400 times? Your brain barely bothers. It compresses it, skips it, files it under. Already know this, and moves on. This is why so many of your richest, most detailed memories cluster in your teens and 20s, back when almost everything was happening for the first time. Researchers call it the reminiscence bump, and it isn't because those years were objectively better. They were simply more novel, so your brain kept more of them. So when you look back at a month that was mostly routine, your memory has almost nothing to show for it, not because the month was short, because your brain decided it wasn't worth keeping. Which means the days that feel like they vanish aren't actually vanishing. You are choosing, without knowing it, not to hold on to them. Now, here's where it gets strange, because this isn't just a modern problem. It's a very old one. And the people who lived without clocks, without calendars, without birthdays at all, may have understood it better than you do. For most of human history, there was no such thing as being busy, and there's a very specific reason for that. Historian E.P. Thompson traced how clock time, the rigid grid of hours and minutes you live inside right now, is actually a fairly recent invention stitched into daily life only once factories needed workers to arrive, labor, and leave on a schedule. Before that, time was task-based. You worked until the grain was milled, or the tide came in, or the light ran out, and then you stopped. There was no clock demanding 9 more minutes of your life. Anthropologist Marshall Salins pushed this even further, spending years studying hunter-gatherer societies and arriving at a conclusion that stunned economists. The so-called primitive societies weren't scraping by in constant labor. Groups like the Zhuhuanzi of the Kalahari tracked hour by hour, spent somewhere around 15 to 20 hours a week actually gathering food. The rest of their waking life, the majority of it, was rest, storytelling, and doing essentially nothing in particular. Salins called them the original affluent society, not because they had more stuff, because they had more time and they knew it. It wasn't only that ancient people had more free hours, It's that the hours they did mark were marked on purpose. Anthropologist Arnold van Gennep, writing about rites of passage across dozens of cultures, noticed that traditional societies didn't let time pass anonymously. Birth, the first hunt, marriage, death, each one was staged as a deliberate threshold, a before and an after, a chapter break the entire community stopped to witness. Your calendar has almost none of that left. A birthday shows up, gets a slice of cake, and disappears into the same beige procession of Mondays as everything else. No wonder the years blur. Nothing in your week is built to interrupt the blur on purpose. That should stop you for a second. You live in the most productive, most technologically accelerated era in human history, with machines that do in seconds what used to take days. And yet, you feel more rushed than a person foraging for roots in the Kalahari Desert with nothing but a digging stick. How is that possible? Part of the answer is grim. Life for early humans was short in one very specific sense. Researchers Michael Gervin and Hillard Kaplan studied modern hunter-gatherer populations as a window into ancestral life, and found brutally high mortality in infancy and childhood, sometimes close to half of all children not surviving to adulthood. That dragged average life expectancy down into the 30s. But here's the part almost nobody tells you. If you made it past childhood, if you survived the fevers and the predators and the famines of your first 5 years, your odds improved dramatically. Someone who reached 15 could reasonably expect to live into their 60s, sometimes their 70s. The danger was front-loaded. Childhood was the gauntlet. Adulthood, once you cleared it, was not nearly as short as the average number suggests. So the ancient human who survived to adulthood was not sprinting through a short life in constant terror of the end. They were living inside long stretches of ordinary, repetitive, deeply present time. Hunting, resting, telling the same stories around the same fires, watching the same stars. And somehow, that repetition didn't compress their experience the way it compresses yours. Why not? Because they weren't performing time. You are. Somewhere in the last 100 years, being busy stopped being a burden and started being a badge. Researcher Sylvia Bellezza and her colleagues found that in modern status-driven cultures, talking about how little free time you have actually signals status. Busyness reads as importance, so an overflowing calendar becomes something you show off rather than something you escape. So you fill your days, not always because the tasks demand it, but because an empty calendar quietly feels like a failure. Meanwhile, your attention, the very thing that decides what your brain keeps, is being pulled apart on purpose. Researcher Gloria Mark, who has spent years measuring how long people can focus on one screen before switching away, has watched that number collapse over the past 2 decades, down to somewhere around a few dozen seconds. Every switch is a tiny reset. Every notification is a new, unfinished routine. And every one of those filled hours, if it's routine, if it's scrolling, if it's the 40th version of a Tuesday you've already lived, gets compressed by your brain into almost nothing. You are working harder than a forager and remembering less of your own life than one did. Does that sound like progress to you? You've felt this collision before, even if you never named it. A single week traveling somewhere unfamiliar can feel longer, richer, more eventful in memory than an entire ordinary month back home. Nothing about the calendar changed. What changed is how much of that week your brain actually bothered to keep. New streets, new food, new faces, new mistakes to laugh about later, all of it stamped in detail. because none of it was routine yet. Then you come home, the days fold back into the same script, and a month evaporates in what feels like an afternoon. Your life isn't actually made of days. It's made of the days your brain refused to skip. Here's the twist inside the twist. The moment your brain becomes most alive to time, the moment it stops compressing and starts truly paying attention, is the moment you believe your time is running out. Psychologist Laura Carstensen spent decades studying this at Stanford, and what she found reshapes almost everything about how a person should think about a life. Carstensen discovered that when people perceive their remaining time as limited, not just the elderly, but also young people facing a serious diagnosis or entire populations living through something like a citywide crisis, their priorities shift almost instantly. They stop chasing novelty for its own sake. They stop collecting new acquaintances and optimizing for some distant future payoff. Instead, they narrow in hard on the people and experiences that already matter to them. She called it socio-emotional selectivity theory. Study after study found that people who felt time was short reported higher emotional well-being, deeper relationships, and, strangely, more satisfaction with their lives than people who believed they had endless time ahead. What does that tell you about the way you're spending this year? It means the emotional clarity you would expect to feel only at the very end of a life is available to you right now, for free, the moment you stop assuming you have unlimited time to get around to what matters. Think about what that means for the Tuesday you are about to lose. Right now, your brain is deciding in real time whether today gets filed away as a real memory or compressed into nothing. And it is making that decision based on how much attention you actually give it. Not how many hours it takes, not how productive it looks. Attention. A hunter-gatherer sitting by a fire, fully present, was not racing anyone. A person scrolling through 4 hours of content they will not remember by tomorrow is racing everyone and losing to all of it at once. The length of a life was never really the number carved on a gravestone. It is the number of moments you were actually fully there for. So go back to that party. You're at a birthday party. Yours. The candles are still smoking and everyone is still watching you make a wish. Only this time, you're not doing math about how fast the year went. You already know why it went fast. You spent most of it on autopilot and your brain quietly decided none of it was worth keeping. The real wish, the only one that actually changes anything, was never for more years. It's for fewer, forgettable ones. Life was never really short. You were just letting most of it happen without you.
If this changed the way you think, imagine what comes next. Like, subscribe, and share.